Hello everyone, I'm Matthew Chalmers and this is The Liberator. It's a place where we talk about history and culture, animal rights, philosophy, literature, anything I really fancy in order to feel more connected with other people, with other species, and humans are a very special species. Not least because we're the only species which thinks of itself as being special. This creates problems. We identify with our specialness so much that we place ourselves above and beyond the confines of the animal kingdom. There are humans and there are animals, and those two things are different. Aristotle ranked different species on a scale and put human beings on the top of the ladder. The two biggest religions in the world, Christianity and Islam, as well as the Jewish tradition they grew out with, sanctified and solidified our sense of superiority. And the fear of you, and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. It's pretty interesting that the writers of Genesis saw that animals would dread and fear us. Quite prescient, you might say. It's clear from this reading that humans are in an exceptional position. The rest of the natural world is our property, our resource, which can be exploited for our own ends. Seeing as we're on the big religions, here's a quick joke. An imam, a rabbi, and a priest walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "Is this some sort of joke?" Please like and subscribe. Please. Please. Humans are very special. We have language, art, tool use on a stupefying scale. We can use our imaginations to try and predict the future and to dwell on the distant past. We have created technologies which allow us to soar through the clouds, to plumb the deepest crevices of our oceans, to cross the inhospitable deserts of the Sahara and Antarctica, and even to reach our moon. However, despite these incredible achievements, one major reason why humans don't feel like other animals is because there aren't many animals very much like us. Our closest relative, chimpanzees, diverged from us about 6 million years ago, which is quite a significant time. However, we forget that Homo sapiens was once one hominid species out of perhaps 20 or more. How would we feel if our close cousins survived today? How would we treat them? How would their presence challenge our notion of a human-animal binary? Over 30 years ago, an Inuit hunter living on the west coast of Greenland, named Jens Larsen, stumbled upon a truly flummoxing sight. Keenly familiar with all the wildlife of the area, the wildlife on whom he survived, he nevertheless came across 3 whales, the likes of which he had never seen. He had seen animals similar to them before, but never with this combination of features. If he didn't know better, he would have thought that they looked like narwhals, but not quite narwhals, for they had no horn, and were smaller and squishier like a beluga. In fact, they looked like a mixture between the two. Part narwhal, part beluga. Larsen shot the animals, yet he left one of their skulls hanging from the door of his hut for posterity, as a reminder and a trophy from this bizarre encounter. While this might strike you as a tall tale, scientists analysed the skull and announced the first ever proof of a hybrid new to science, the Narluga. Why do I tell this story? Well, it's because species is an invention of our own. It does map onto reality. There are clearly different types of animals, but we are the ones who choose how to categorise them. We are the ones who paint neat lines of separation between species, when in reality nature itself is far more murky. It's often said that a species is defined as a group of animals who can have fertile offspring with one another, but that definition doesn't always hold up. Hybrids are not always infertile. Coyotes and dogs can have fertile offspring, for example, as can grizzly bears and polar bears. Incidentally, so could humans and Neanderthals. We know that between 1 and 4% of the genome of non-African Homo sapiens is derived from Neanderthals. Neanderthals are another species of hominid who diverged from a common ancestor with Homo sapiens around 500,000 years ago. Pictured here is the Lapido child, a young boy buried in Portugal who has been argued by some scholars to be a Neanderthal-human hybrid. I don't know if this image really does it justice, but apparently this child had a Neanderthal-like jaw. So, what do we know about Neanderthals? They had pale skin and red hair. They made stone circles out of stalagmites deep inside caves and far from the light. They put pigment on shells. In one case, a Neanderthal carried a fossilized shell, i.e. it was a fossil at the time and not just food, from its origin for 100 kilometers across the Italian peninsula to a cave called Fumani near the Italian Alps. Its dating to 47,000 years ago reduces the possibility that these were modern humans. The shell was found with traces of pigment on it and micro scratches on its lip, which implies the shell had been threaded. We also know that Neanderthals cared for the sick and elderly in their communities. A skull of an old Neanderthal from La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France showed someone with many missing teeth and bad arthritis who must have relied on others to survive. They may have left hand-traced paintings in caves in Spain, which date from 60,000 years ago. And researchers in La Rochade cave in France's Loire Valley said that they have the earliest unambiguous example of Neanderthals making abstract shapes on cave walls from 57,000 years ago. Did they have language? Well, the fact our hybrid children survived and contributed to the modern DNA of human beings suggests it is likely. It can't be ruled out that our sexual relationships were non-consensual, but the offspring of these relationships had to be raised and had to thrive in Neanderthal or human communities, and communication is likely integral to that survival, and the ability for that individual to go on, to mate, and for their DNA to survive until the present day. There is also some supporting anatomical evidence. Neanderthal brains are argued to have a speech-creating region, and Neanderthals also shared hyoid bones with us, key for making speech. It begins to become quite hard to see where Neanderthal ends and human being begins. If you shaved a Neanderthal, placed him in a suit and set him loose in one of today's major cities, you probably wouldn't draw that many funny looks. Looking at Neanderthals, it becomes harder to see how our special faculties for thought, language and reason really are so unique to us after all. In 2013, in Rising Star Cave, South Africa, a new hominid was discovered which challenged much of what we believe about paleoanthropology. Homo naledi is defined by a curious mixture of modern and archaic features. They were bipedal, but retained many features associated with tree climbing, like curved fingers, and probably weren't great long-distance runners. They had small heads and skulls, comparable to our more ape-like ancestors, like Australopithecus. They were small, with males only reaching 4 feet and 9 inches in height, yet their hands, wrists, and feet were similar to those of modern humans. The primitive features of these people led researchers to initially believe the fossils were around 2 million years old, and yet dating revealed that they were actually only 230,000 years old, making this species a contemporary of modern Homo sapiens. However, the most controversial claim about Homo naledi revolves around how their remains entered the Rising Star Cave, which is highly inaccessible and deep within the ground. The cave has no water damage or erosion to speak of, and so excavators claimed that the bones could not have been carried there in a flood. There was no sign of predation on these people, no sign of gnawing on the bones, and there were no other species found in the chamber, apart from one small bird. Excavators formed the opinion that the bones were intentionally deposited there, perhaps as a kind of burial. Now, it is possible that Homo sapiens deposited these bones, or that the theory is flat out incorrect. It was highly controversial, and it's not universally accepted. The peer reviews for the initial papers publishing Homo naledi and Rising Star Cave were very much more conservative in hypothesizing about the available evidence, and critical of missteps they said the excavating team made. However, the placement of the bodies is still strange, particularly when you consider a recent paper which found very little variation in teeth size between individuals, which may be accounted for by a lack of sex difference. This is very, very strange indeed. If all of the bodies were of one sex, this might mean they were being intentionally selected for by Homo naledi on the basis of sex. So while it might not be the case that these bodies were intentionally buried, it is at least possible that it was the case. It is at least possible that hundreds of thousands of years ago, a different species of hominid quite unlike ourselves were penetrating deep into underground caves to ritually deposit their loved ones. Did this help them grieve? Give them a chance to say goodbye? What was the significance of this cave to them? We may never have the answers to those questions, but it seems at least possible that the origins of religious thinking can be found in hominids more primitive and strange than Neanderthals. It raises the question, if Homo naledi had survived, what would we think about them? How would we relate to them? Would we think of them more as animals or as people? Would we expand the animal kingdom to include a species who possibly buried their dead? Now we go back even further, to the world's first globe-spanning hominid species, Homo erectus, who first emerged around 2 million years ago and only went extinct around 110,000 years ago. Homo erectus spanned the continent of Africa and was present in most of Eurasia, from southern Europe to Korea to Indonesia. Homo erectus were apex predators and were the first hominids we know of to use fire, either in warding off predators or keeping themselves warm. Homo erectus could also have used fire in hunting and in cooking, allowing them to gain access to extra calories. Testament to Homo erectus's ingenuity is their presence on several island landmasses, which include Flores and Crete. These were islands at the time of Homo erectus, so the question arises, how did they get there? Some have postulated that perhaps they were fortunately carried to these islands on vegetation by an errant tsunami, or they hung on to logs, but this seems to me to be refusing to consider the obvious. And it also neglects to explain how stable populations of Homo erectus formed on these islands. Many scholars have in turn postulated that Homo erectus travelled there by seacraft. Who knows of what kind, perhaps only the most basic of rafts, but this must have been intentional for enough members to cross to these islands to start communities. Perhaps most intriguing of all is the evidence of Homo erectus's symbolic thought. One fascinating example is an engraved bivalve shell from Indonesia around 500,000 years old. It has a zigzag pattern engraved on it, which must have been intentionally created by a Homo erectus, apparently using a shark tooth. Why did they do this? An idle doodle, perhaps, of no greater significance, yet the very fact that they doodled, that they created a shape without any practical value, is deeply significant. Well, I hope you've been finding this interesting so far, but you may be thinking, what relevance does this have to how we treat animals today? Neanderthals and Homo naledi might be interesting, but they've been extinct for tens of thousands of years, so the question of how we might treat them if they were still around is utterly irrelevant. However, looking at them undermines our self-image as Homo sapiens, as beings which sit apart from and above the rest of creation. Those things we hold as definitional about human beings, art, language, religion, complex tool use, if those things have deeper evolutionary roots, then it stands to reason that we are of nature and not above it. Perhaps the connective tissues we share with the animal world go deeper than we care to believe. Is it possible that some of these tantalizingly human urges exist in animals still around today? Watch this fascinating video from the Jane Goodall Foundation.
When the chimpanzees approach, they hear this roaring sound, and you see the hair stand a little on end, and then they move a bit quicker. And when they get here, they'll rhythmically sway, often upright, picking up big rocks and throwing them for maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes climbing up the vines at the side and swinging out into the spray. And they're right down in the water, which normally they avoid. Afterwards, you'll see them sitting on a rock, actually in the stream, looking up, watching the water with their eyes as it falls down, and then watching it going away. I can't help feeling that this waterfall display or dance is perhaps triggered by feelings of awe, wonder that we feel. The chimpanzee's brain is so like ours. They have emotions that are clearly similar to or the same as those that we call happiness, sadness, fear, despair, and so forth. Incredible intellectual abilities that we used to think unique to us. So why wouldn't they also have feelings of some kind of spirituality, which is really being amazed at things outside yourself? And it's the same at the start of heavy rain. I've seen it a couple of times when a sudden wind came roaring through the valley, and it maybe it's defying the elements, defying the rain. Maybe it's the same kind of amazement that they feel with a waterfall. I think chimpanzees are as spiritual as we are, but they can't analyze it, they don't talk about it, they can't describe what they feel. You get the feeling that it's all locked up inside them. And the only way they can express it is through this fantastic rhythmic dance.
It's astounding to me that such a respected primatologist is attributing these sensations to chimpanzees. A wild thing about chimpanzees is they also seemingly like to dance. Here I'll quote a section of an article in Science by author Eva Frederick. One day in 2014, primatologist Yuko Hattori was trying to teach a mother chimpanzee in her lab to keep a beat. Hattori would play a repetitive piano note, and the chimp would attempt to tap out the rhythm on a small electronic keyboard in hopes of receiving a tasty piece of apple. Everything went as expected in the experiment room, but in the next room over, something strange was happening. Another chimpanzee, the mother's son, heard the beat and began to sway his body back and forth, almost as if he were dancing. I was shocked, Hattori says. I was not aware that without any training or reward, a chimpanzee would spontaneously engage with the sound. Apparently they have no sense of rhythm though, which is pretty funny. Chimpanzees dance like your dad 3 hours into a dinner party. Still, researchers posit that this moving to sound, whether it's rhythmic or not, might be the origins of dance. Now, knowing this, do you feel like killing or eating a chimp? Most people already don't want to do that, but what about when it comes to other species? Newborn piglets run towards their mother's voices and can recognize them by 2 weeks old. Sows sing to their offspring during nursing sessions through a succession of welcoming grunts. Pigs engage in constant communication among themselves, boasting a repertoire of over 20 distinct vocalizations. Mother hens have close bonds with their chicks. These chicks learn from their mother when to peck, when to rest, and how to respond to potential threats. In giant farms, chicks are raised in massive incubators and not by their mothers. Chicks raised without the presence of a nurturing mother tend to exhibit heightened fearfulness and increased likelihood of developing behavioural issues such as feather pecking when the birds peck each other out of stress. Roosters may be able to recognise themselves in the mirror. Roosters make alarm calls when they see birds of prey, but only when they are with other birds. Squawking while alone could draw the predator to them. Researchers projected an image of a bird of prey above a rooster and measured how frequently they called. When another bird was present, they called far more frequently than when by themselves or sitting with a mirror, implying that they can recognise the difference between another bird and themselves in the reflection. Cows have best friends and get stressed when they are separated from them. They also exhibit cognitive biases. Young Holstein calves exhibited a negative judgment bias for at least 22 hours after hot iron disbudding. And for those who don't know, disbudding is a painful procedure which stunts the growth of a cow's horns. Tuskfish use tools. Fish, in general, have the same eyesight as us and fall for the same optical illusions. For example, researchers have discovered that fish fall for the Canisa triangle illusion in the same way that we do. Archerfish learn how to shoot bugs by watching more experienced fish do it first. Research published in the journal PLOS Biology indicated that fish can recognize and respond to themselves in the mirror. Specifically, this was about cleaner wrasse, the car-washing fish of the ocean. When scientists placed marks on the body of the fish, which looked like the parasites they removed from other fish, they then showed them a mirror image of themselves. Instead of trying to clean their reflection, they attempted to remove the marks from off their own bodies. Homo sapiens accounts for around 2.5% of animal life on this planet. Really think about that. Think about the vast rainbow tapestry sentient life has evolved itself into. From Tyrannosaurus rex to llamas, Narlugas, ants, albatrosses, and Neanderthals. We are just one tiny part of this immense tapestry. Humanity is special. but so is everybody else. Is it possible that not just one species among millions is special, but that they all are? What traces the line between those species whose interests matter and those which don't? I don't think there is a line to be drawn. As long as a species, an animal, a thinking being has interests, then those interests should be taken seriously. So, by challenging our notion of human uniqueness, what do we stand to lose and to gain? The current status quo has led to many terrible things. Defining humanity as radically different from other animals has helped undergird some of our most violent practices, namely factory farming. In the UK alone, every year 1.2 billion chickens are slaughtered for meat. If you put those chickens from beak to tail in a line, that line would go around the world 12.5 times. An estimated 92 billion land animals, 77 billion farmed fish, and an astounding 1 to 2 trillion wild fish are killed for food every single year. To put this in perspective, only 114 billion human beings have ever lived on the planet Earth. I think by doing this we damage ourselves. We dip our hands in blood. Our societies are sustained by the deaths, often very cruel deaths, of hundreds of billions of other sentient animals. We legitimize violence, we legitimize pain on an unthinkable scale because we think that other species, despite their ability to feel pain and pleasure, simply do not matter. So we stand in a place where not only our values of compassion and kindness are thoroughly compromised, but we're wrecking the natural world itself. Preventing this destruction is essential. But what else might we gain? In my view, true compassion means extending kindness to all of those beings who can receive it, and rejecting all unnecessary violence and suffering. Downstream of this, we can have healthier diets, more wild spaces, a better climate, better health. More fundamentally, appreciating the beauty and value of non-human life can help us appreciate the natural world on a deeper level. It gives us a sense of growing wonder at the world, and we can appreciate animal life without contradictions if we abstain from harming them. As Kafka said after visiting an aquarium after he became a vegetarian, "Now I can look at you in peace. I don't eat you anymore." We are one of many sentient species, and signs of intelligence and communication are visible all across the animal world. I wanted to explore our immediate hominid ancestors to show you that there is no discernible moment where a brilliant human child is pushed out of an ape's womb. There is no clear moment where human and animal divides. We are animals. We may have differences with other species, but does that make us better than them? If Homo erectus was around today, would we treat them as animals or as people, worthy of respect? And if we'd extend such respect to Homo erectus, then why not other species? Why don't we respect other animals who can equally feel pain, fear, and happiness? Treating all life with compassion and respect has given me a sense of meaning and a sense of peace. And I hope that I've encouraged you to think a little differently about this topic. To finish, I just want to share a story of two great animals I met at a Dean Animal Sanctuary in South Wales. This was Roy, a pig who'd been saved from a dogfighting ring, and a turkey, a female turkey, whose name escapes me, but let's call her Penelope. Pigs and turkeys were animals I did not know, animals I had never met before, really. I was very pleasantly surprised. In fact, I was shocked at how affectionate and interesting and alive these animals were. When you touch them, you can feel the warmth of their bodies, the blood underneath their skin, their muscles, their feathers. They're filled with life. These animals may have been saved and helped by people, but perhaps they can help us too, if we're open to it, by connecting us with something larger than ourselves, the multiplicity of conscious life on this planet. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.